Well, good morning and welcome to day 12 of the 12 days of articles in review. My name is Mary Coughlin. I'm the president and founder of Caring Essentials Collaborative, an organization committed to transforming the heart and soul of healthcare around the world through the adoption of a trauma-informed paradigm. My background, in case you don't know, I'm a neonatal nurse practitioner by training. Now I'm a full-time educator and consultant and coach focused on trauma-informed care. And these past 12 days of articles I've presented to you really represent the body of evidence that is continuing to grow and is much bigger than what I shared, over the past 11 days, looking at adult morbidity and mortality associated with individuals born premature, looking at the challenges around the language of trauma and trauma-informed care. We looked at one really cool clinical evaluation of the impact of a trauma-informed approach to care and how it was perceived as enhancing nurse-parent relationships and nurse-parent support, which is really, really cool. We also looked at the American Academy recent publications from August of 2021, their clinical report really summarizing the body of science regarding the biological relevance and the psychological relevance of adopting a trauma-informed paradigm for pediatrics, and then their policy statement recommending trauma-informed care for all child health services. And then I've also woven in a few other articles looking at the science of caring, which I think is the kind of the action component of operationalizing a trauma-informed care. As I've said repeatedly over this series, that trauma-informed care isn't about doing more. It's about showing how you show up, being more of yourself, being more compassionate, being more empathetic, being more astute and aware, and being able to recognize individuals that are vulnerable for trauma and the signs and symptoms, that those expressions that help us understand what they are experiencing in the moment, pre-verbally and verbally as well. And so, I was looking for an article today, but I got a little bit derailed when I got this really cool email yesterday, late in the day, from Springer Publishing. Myself and my amazing team, Tara DeWolfe DPT, CNT, CLC, trauma-informed professional out of Illinois, and my other partner in crime, Kristy Fuller, OTRL, also CNT, CLC, both NIDCAP professionals. Tara and Kristy are NIDCAP professionals and trauma-informed professionals. We were invited to write a chapter in the 3rd edition of the Neonatal Nursing Care Handbook, published by Kenner et al. And so I kind of wanted to just share with you a review of the article that we got to submit. And I think you'll find it really interesting and relevant and give you some practical strategies. So I know I'm deviating, it's not an article, but I think you'll find it pretty relevant. And of course, I recommend that you go out and get the book, get the handbook, and I'll put the information in the description when I post this on YouTube. So let me pull up the chapter. So the chapter is titled Trauma Informed Developmental Care. And we kind of open the chapter with an overview of what's known about adverse childhood experiences, the long history of research that has accompanied that discovery, if you will, and then kind of narrowing down and bringing it closer to home within the NICU and the work of Monterosso and Provenzi and those researchers. And then there was a nice structure that was presented to us for the writing of this chapter of this handbook. And so I think you'll find it really helpful and even kind of clarifying, because I have thrown a lot of information at you over these past 11, now 12 days. And so this might be an opportunity for you to really kind of get a handle on what the heck is all of this and how does this all fit into my practice. So the section under definitions, we introduce the definition of what is trauma. We talk about what is trauma, a trauma-informed approach to care. And then we introduce this idea of trauma-informed language, and with an emphasis on how language really acknowledges the personhood of the individual and reflects an awareness of our shared human experiences and our shared humanity. And so to get more specific as to what the heck I'm talking about, it's referring to the individual by their name and not by their diagnosis. It's using language that reflects being with another person and not doing to another person. It's person first language. And when we can do that, it really shifts how we show up, and it also shifts the engagement, right? The respect and the engagement and the compassion that we can show to the babies, to the families, and to our colleagues as well. We also provide a pretty up-to-date backdrop introducing the physiology of toxic stress and trauma, and some of that I've presented to you in the past. We represent some of the work of Agorastos et al. When they developed this really, really cool conceptual model to help us understand all of the points along the developmental continuum that predispose the individual who is vulnerable to trauma to the mechanisms that actually are activated in the setting of a trauma exposure. So it's like genetic predispositions, prenatal or perinatal experiences, then that early life experience, and then all of the biologic systems and processes that are impacted and how they go on to impact the developmental trajectory of the individual. We talk a little bit about inflammation and neural circuitry with regard to the neuroendocrine immune network. So I feel like we did a pretty good job really laying out the science, referencing a lot of the brilliant work that's already been done with the eco-biodevelopmental framework, and a little bit of polyvagal in there as well. And then we get a little practical now. So we talk about some of the neuroscientific and socio-emotional consequences of toxic stress in the neonatal intensive care unit, how that prolonged activation of stress can lead to immunosuppression, oxidative damage, aberrant metabolic modulation, stimulation of bacterial growth, increased oxygen consumption, and compromised cardiac function. And all of this is very well substantiated in the research by just brilliant researchers like Cassavet, Kong, Fitch, Weber and Harrison, Carr Morris, Monterosi, and Provenzi, all of these people that have really added to our body of understanding what trauma does to these individuals in the short term and the long term. Research has found connections between highly stressful experiences in children and an increased risk for later mental health pathologies, to include generalized anxiety disorders, major depressive disorders, poor emotion regulation, and an increased risk for suicide. And then from a physiologic, adult morbidity perspective, we know that these individuals are at high risk for cardiovascular disease, fibromyalgia, metabolic syndromes, obesity, central sensitizing syndromes. And then similar to how we've got the second edition of Transformative Nursing in the NICU laid out, we talked about the implications in this chapter of toxic stress for the infant, the family, and clinicians, because of course clinicians bear witness to this trauma, and you can't be unfazed by this experience. There's a really cool quote from Chicken Soup, one of the Chicken Soup books. It says, something to the effect, okay, I'm kind of, paraphrasing this, but something to the effect of like, thinking that you can bear witness to suffering and not be touched by it is just like thinking you can walk through water without getting wet. Just can't happen. So we present the evidence well referenced about the implications of toxic stress exposure to the infant, the family, and the clinician as well. And then we talk about nursing intention and assessment. So the intention is really to do the best by the patient, right? So when approaching a caregiving and an assessment, the clinician must consider the intention for that encounter, for that moment, when one is able to come from a place of alignment and awareness, right? Being fully present for other. And we offer some strategies to facilitate that alignment, if you will, with that caring moment in time, so that you can bring your best self. And then the assessment piece, and we reference a really great paper by Sanders and Hall published in 2018, I think it was the Journal of Perinatology, where they really integrated the polyvagal theory into their paper and beautifully described the behavioral and physiologic expressions of exposure to toxic stress. So that's, kind of helped us craft that assessment piece, And then my colleagues have developed this really cool developmental participation skills assessment tool that we're actually in the process of revising for submission for publication, but really using tools that are evidence-based to assess infant readiness for a caring encounter, be able to evaluate the quality of the infant's participation in the encounter, that they should be participants in the encounter. It's not just me flipping and stripping and doing you up, but that it's a reciprocal experience, an encounter, an engagement with the patient. And when we do that, that mitigates their experience of toxic stress and trauma. And so then we include some little excerpts from the tool itself, which I think you'll find really helpful. It's wicked user-friendly. And then some clinical manifestations. What does trauma exposure look like? So that you're really familiar with what the baby is telling you, how to interpret this. I mean, I think we have a general understanding of different motoric expressions, gastrointestinal expressions, physiologic expressions of distress. And so now we're just kind of wrapping this concept of trauma and toxic stress around that. So early signs of stress and late signs of stress, and if you remember way back, there was some really great stuff. Part of the NIDCAP work, the Brazelton and put together this stoplight model where you could see early signs of stress, like stable, early signs of stress, late signs of stress. And they color coded it, like stable was green, early was yellow, and late was red. And you don't want to get to red, right? You want to really be balancing yourself between green and yellow, and then giving the little person a timeout. And it might not even be the little person. You should be able to see these in an adult as well, and being able to read those cues and see when do you need to pull back, when can you move forward. And that's really what we're trying to do, is create this dyadic rapport, right? This beautiful dance of engagement, communication, interaction with the patients and the families. And that's what we did. We included some signs for babies, some signs in families, and examples of trauma exposure responses in clinicians as well. And that data, those behavioral manifestations were curated from the work of Laura Vandernoot-Lipsky in her book, Trauma Stewardship. So I think you'll find this chapter really helpful, gives you lots of pragmatic information that can really help hone and build your skills in becoming a practicing trauma-informed professional. But the work is more than just the doing, right? So, and that's, you've heard me say that repeatedly. It's really about reconnecting, rediscovering your authentic self, and bringing your authentic self and that power and that mission and that purpose to the service of others. And so we do introduce our framework for trauma-informed care that's meshed with the 5 guiding principles of a trauma-informed paradigm. These principles are safety, choice, collaboration, empowerment, and trustworthiness. And then surrounding that are the 5 core measures for trauma-informed developmental care, where we introduce the healing environment, protected sleep, pain and stress prevention and management, activities of daily living, which embraces posture and play, eating and nourishment, and skincare and hygiene. And then finally, compassionate collaborative relationships. And that's really about supporting emotional well-being, self-efficacy, and communication. And then we building to identifying the attributes, and identifying and then becoming competent, developing competence in these attributes of a trauma-informed professional. So really the chapter kind of just lays out a roadmap for this journey to become trauma-informed. The 8 attributes of a trauma-informed professional were identified by an international interdisciplinary faculty board of neonatal experts. And the goal was to identify those attributes that would then become competencies to meet the whole person needs of the baby and family in crisis. And to do that, it hinges on the wholeness of the clinician or of the professional themselves. You cannot give what you do not have. And so these 8 attributes look at knowledgeable, all ways of knowing, not just empirical knowledge, but all ways of knowing. Healing intention, which we call all ways of healing. Personal wholeness, or all ways of wholeness. Courage, or all ways of braving. Advocacy, all ways of championing. Role model and mentor, all ways of guiding. Scholarship, it's really scholarly. And that's all ways of sharing our knowledge. And then ultimately the eighth attribute is being a leader for change, or all ways of leading. And so, and then we kind of, draw our conclusion in the chapter about, the importance of the awareness of the experience of trauma in the NICU for babies, families, and clinicians is yet a first step to transform and humanize this fragile yet critical care environment. Trauma-informed care is an effective, compassionate, and evidence-based strategy. And through this paradigm, clinicians are invited to actively buffer the trauma experienced by the babies and families they serve in the NICU and beyond. In mitigating the needless suffering of babies and families, NICU nurses and other clinicians are empowered to transform the experience of intensive care for vulnerable infants, families in crisis, and themselves. So I hope you do consider checking out the book. It's just laden with just a ton of really great practical information. So if you're a NICU expert, if you're a NICU expert, get the book anyways, because there's always more to learn. And if you're a NICU clinician across all disciplines, although the book is a nursing handbook, I think you'll find an incredible resource in this textbook. So I want to thank you very much, you guys, for spending all of your time with me over these past 12 days. I hope that you find this information relevant. I hope it's really made you more curious about what it is to be trauma-informed, and maybe curious to join our movement to, transform the heart and soul of healthcare around the world through the adoption of a trauma-informed paradigm and creating trauma-informed professionals around the globe. So on that note, I'll let you go. You guys take care, care well. Please reach out for any questions or comments. Let's keep this discussion going, and be well. Bye.